All right, well, thanks everybody for coming. This is a really exciting event. You may not be aware, we did the Space Apps Challenge last year here in New York, and you know, we decided to do a little bit more. We had a little more lead time. Last year, we actually pulled the event off in like 3 weeks, thanks to the help of the New York Tech Council and Startup Bus New York. And you know, this year we had a little more lead time, so we thought we'd have some, you know, some cool events and have some great speakers in to talk about stuff and get some more promotion out so we can make it even bigger. Last year, the Space Apps Challenge ran in 25 sites internationally. This year, it's 75 sites in 41 countries. And New York City was chosen as a global flagship for North America, thanks to our work last year. So, without too much more ado, we can talk a little bit more about the Space Apps Challenge at the end of our little presentation. I'd like to just say thank you once again to New York Tech Council for helping organize this event tonight. Thank you so much to AlleyNYC for providing the venue tonight and for the weekend of the Space Apps Challenge. And also thank you to the folks at Startup Bus New York who have helped greatly in helping us acquire sponsorships and will be participating in the hackathon on the weekend. So great thanks tonight for the food and drink as supplied. Thank you to John Gottfried of Twilio. I think give me a round of applause for that. John is going to say a few words about Twilio, and then we will introduce our speakers and start the presentation.
I'll keep this brief because they're going to be infinitely more interesting than I am. But I'm John Gottfried. I'm a developer evangelist at Twilio, and Twilio builds tools for developers and communications like text messaging and phone calls for their applications. So last year at Space Apps Challenge, we had a couple projects use us. I worked on one that was, it would send you a text message to notify you anytime the International Space Station was coming overhead, right? So you could know when to look up and find it. And we're really hoping that we'll have a lot more awesome projects like that this year that sort of improve accessibility to these technologies. So thank you, and yeah, looking forward to the speakers.
Thanks, John, and thanks again to Twilio. Okay, so I'm just going to say a few quick words about each of our speakers. First up tonight, we're going to have Andrew Hill. He's a senior scientist at CartoDB/Vizzuality. Vizzuality? Andrew earned his master's and PhD in biology, studying in Boulder, Colorado. He has a broad interest in how new technologies can drive scientific questions and the process of creating knowledge in new ways. And second, we're doing Liz. Yes. So Liz Berry, data scientist for the Public Laboratory. Liz is an activist and designer interested in collaborative and urban environments. She spent her early days in New York catalyzing public interactions on sidewalks and subway stations with a giant "Talk to Me" sign, as well as working 25 floors above Wall Street, designing international new cities and campuses. Third, we have David Hu, who's a developer advocate at Foursquare. David is Foursquare's developer advocate, helping a community of 40,000 plus developers build location-powered applications. He's a regular attendee of hackathons and as both a participant and mentor, and has a background in web programming. He has previously worked for Microsoft and Codecademy, and is currently in his final semester at Columbia University pursuing a BS in computer science. And last but not least, our moderator, Sara-Jayne, the CTO of Change Assembly. As the CTO at Change Assembly, Sara-Jayne designs and builds systems that link artificial reasoning, community-based mapping, open data, big data, data science, and unmanned systems to help find early signs of crisis in very large data systems. She has a background in systems engineering, innovations management, information fusion, knowledge management, intelligence systems, and autonomy. Sara-Jayne is also a compulsive crisis mapper, a team lead at Standby Task Force, a lead at Crisis Mappers New York City, and former lead of Crisis Camp UK. So with that, I will allow Sarah to start the presentation.
Okay, I guess I'm doing the beacon here. So, presentation title is Unleashing the Power of Data. But actually that's not where you start. The panel tonight are all about how do you actually get that data in the first place. I work on humanitarian systems, and quite a lot of the time there isn't the data that we need. There is no data, you don't trust the people who generated the data, you can't get at the data. So how do you go and find out what's happening in the world? And how do you do that with people available to you, which could be everybody? And how do you do that well? So I think these are some prime examples of data from people. So tonight's format is a short talk from each of our speakers, then a question and answer session where I get to give questions, and then a question and answer session where you get to ask questions. So I'll try to keep mine brief, okay? And without any further ado, Andrew, would you like to tell us about your work?
Yeah. Do you want me to use that, or can I can I yell? I can yell too. Okay, hi everybody, I'm Andrew. I'm at Vizzuality. We're a Spanish company. That's where putting the Z's together and thinking it's very pronounceable comes from, but it is Vizzuality and CartoDB. I'm a senior scientist. I come from a background of biology, actually. I worked in museums thinking about how we can put together big data sets about biodiversity to get some understanding about the world around us. And the problem with those data sets was always that, like Sarah pointed out, we just couldn't get enough. And so we looked at things like building networks of different museum collections, and that's something that I'm going to come back to give us a really large data set, and then adding it to things like data modeling, so that we can start to drive things about where a species occurs, what the likelihood of it being there is, and then doing things like assessment, so how climate change is going to affect where that species is, or what sort of protection we need to put on that species. And so I was working on these questions, and I always had this bent for mapping and data visualization and the outreach side of it. And so that brought me to Vizzuality. I started collaborating with Vizzuality when I was in graduate school still, and actually I started working for Vizzuality before I finished my degree. I moved to New York 2 years ago and finished my degree the first year I was here, at the same time I was working for Vizzuality. So who's Vizzuality? We're a kind of strange company. We fit in an interesting niche of data visualization, software development, scientific tool development, and scientific collaboration. But we always kind of wrap it into this idea that we want to work on stories that matter. We really put a lot of attention into telling stories that we do think matter to make them better. And the stories that we overwhelmingly think matter are stories that have to do with the natural world. So we work on a lot of projects that have to do with biodiversity and try to make that data accessible and make it available to the people that need it, that want to do interesting things with it. Or just making things about conservation, protected areas available. So this is a project that we worked on called Protected Planet, and it makes all of the protected areas in the world available in a web interface, and you can download the raw data and look at where it is. But it was also, the original inspiration for this project was also to engage the people that are on the ground that are trying to protect these areas, or the ones that are just responsible for protecting these areas, to say, what are the legal boundaries of the place, and what are the places that we're actually seeing protected? And it was a way for the WCMC, who's in charge of keeping track of that information, to get that information back into the original data set. Or this one that combines the two, biodiversity and protected areas. And so this was an early project that we worked on that was trying to combine the data of biodiversity with protected area and tell you what sort of species you'd likely see in a protected area based on the things that we've seen in museum collections in the past. And then, like I said, the sort of more hardcore tool development. So this is a project we worked on where the scientists were detecting deforestation in the Amazonia. And this was based on machine learning, and they needed a validation tool. So we built them a tool where they could quickly train people in their lab and elsewhere to look at the outputs of the machine learning and put information back into it to say whether or not it was truly deforestation. And then this is a little bit more of the outreach. This is a project that we're still developing that's actually taking that another step, and this is supposed to give near real-time deforestation data to policymakers, scientists, and the public as well. So if you want to look at this and you want to get where is deforestation happening, and try to ask the questions of why or what you can do to change it, we're trying to build a tool that will help you do that. Vizzuality is totally open source, so you can go to GitHub and see everything that we're up to, watch our commit stream. We have a couple different repos, so there's Vizzuality, and then there's the one that was mentioned, CartoDB, which I'll come back to at the end of this, what that is, which is another project of ours. So where does that put Vizzuality with citizen science? Well, like I said, we were always kind of passionate about these conservation and biodiversity issues. So actually, our first foray into the citizen science was helping out people that were planning bioblitzes. So we did a big case study with a group of scientists to say, how can we make tools for bioblitzes better? Now, if you're not familiar with a bioblitz, it's a project where you get a group of people on a specific date in a specific place, and you go out and you try to collect all the pieces of biodiversity that you can identify very quickly. And so we were trying to build a tool to make that easier, because the common practice for that is to take sheets of paper, fill out pieces of paper, So we thought, well, this is the mobile age, right? We can take pictures of it. We can geolocate that very quickly. We can make an app that you can collect that information quickly with it. Well, with the goal of all that being to fill in the gaps in this map. So this is back to this idea of what do we know about all the biodiversity. If you look at this map, it's actually a little bit disheartening. This map is old, but this is all the biodiversity we knew, digitized biodiversity that we knew maybe 3 years ago. And you'll see that the patterns they very much just closely follow human population mostly, and there's some other patterns in here, but they're not really following where biodiversity is. And so it's really hard as a scientist to say that data set is anywhere near complete. So you need sort of this two-pronged approach of collecting more data and doing modeling on that data to do more things. So that's how we got into citizen science. But then we became members of what's called the Citizen Science Alliance. This is a Sloan Foundation-funded initiative to make better citizen science tools on the web. And it helps support and contribute to projects going on in the Zooniverse. If you're not familiar with Zooniverse, go to zooniverse.org. There's a large library of different projects going on in different domains. These are all projects that are run in the browser. So if you want to contribute, you contribute just using your web browser. And there's several different ways that you can do that, but definitely go check this out. One of the first things that we worked on with them was a project called Old Weather. It was a really successful project. The idea here was that the Royal Navy had ship logs from 100 years ago that looked like this, and they wanted to extract that information. So we built this tool that gave a very systematic way for extracting each element of that record, and we built a little game around it so that people could become captains of these ships and watch these ships move around on the map. So as the ship's logs were transcribed, that ship would progress around the world where it really was 100 years ago. So this is really great, but what information can you get from that log? Well, the scientists really actually wanted it to start building better climate models, because this was really pristine data from oceans away from populated areas that was giving you weather information from 100 years ago. This is a data set that doesn't exist in many forms. And so we were extracting that so the scientists could really use it. The second project that we worked on was a project called Planet Hunters. This is a slightly different track. I give a different talk about this to talk about what makes a successful citizen science project on the web. But you can see this is very different. We don't have this sort of game where you become a captain. All we do in this project is we ask the citizen scientists to draw boxes around these divergences from a light wave. So what this project is doing is there's a telescope called the Kepler telescope, and it stares off into deep space, and it takes long-term images of light waves light intensity from stars in space. And this graph is telling you how that light intensity fluctuates. And just different noise variance and all that leads to the graph. But if you see that graph dip periodically, you can say that could be evidence of a planet getting in the way of that light. And so we asked the people just to draw the box around it to see if we can find a periodic case. We had one case where this was publicized on the BBC, and we had over 1 million classifications in 48 hours. And that actually leads to the scientists that are behind the Kepler telescope turning that back on that region of space and trying to verify whether or not there's a planet there orbiting the star. So far we've had 3 published stars come out of it. The 4th one has been accepted. It's not published yet. The 4th one is a really special and interesting case. It's a planet that's orbiting a 4-star system. Pretty exciting. A project that we did about a year ago was a short-lived project. It had a very discrete mission. It was this underwater mission with NASA, and they were collecting all these images. They were doing these fake training runs of submersibles, but they were collecting all these images of the sea floor, pretending it was asteroids and foreign planets. And they said, well, what could we do with that data? And what can we learn about engaging citizen scientists in the process? So the real goal here was to say, can we engage citizen scientists in a way that we trust and we feel good about it, so that when we send one of these real missions to like an asteroid going by in space, that we can quickly mark up those images using citizen science. And so we did this test run, and we had the citizen scientists actually mark up biodiversity on the seafloor. And this was actually another kind of fun game environment. The mission lasted 5 days. It actually paralleled exactly the mission of the submersible underwater. This is the only project I ever have been involved in that was delayed by a tropical storm, which is kind of cool. So so then here's the here's the submersible traversing the seafloor, and actually there's just thousands and thousands of little points of biodiversity making up these lines. And so those are the sorts of citizen science projects that we've been involved in. And so now, what are we doing? This is kind of the more interesting thing, is where we're going is Vizzuality and what we're doing to stay involved with the citizen science. Well, coming back to this idea of these biodiversity data points and not having enough, I mentioned before that one of the ways that we get more biodiversity information is by digitizing the records in museums and then linking those museums to one another, so we have a giant database, or a giant data set of biodiversity records. So that's a problem because you can see that she's standing by a lot of records that aren't digital. And that's still a problem. Right now we have something around, I want to say, it's 500 million digital records available, which is small when you think of people collecting data from space or someplace like that. But for biodiversity, it's actually really huge. But the estimate is that there's still billions left in museums that just haven't been extracted yet. And so we're building a new tool. It's called Notes from Nature, and it should have its first launch in weeks or a month or so. And the idea here is to bring together a few of those key collections that we're waiting to see them become digital, and do a very much old weather-like approach to it, asking people to help us transcribe the data on those labels. And so all we're asking here is that the museums take images of the labels, and then we ask the citizen scientists to get engaged and help us extract the information from it. Another thing that we're involved in is a sort of different approach to engagement is EcoHack. And I don't know if any of you have heard of EcoHack. It's very similar to the Space Apps Challenge. It's something that we crew with Liz, actually. And it gets scientists, mostly here in the city, but scientists with real challenges, real problems that they're trying to face, that they don't have the engineering or the design skills, or they just want to find a new community of collaborators to come in, and we get them all in the same room and working on these projects. So it starts with one night of presentations from these scientists about what they're trying to do, and then different people in the community work on those projects. We've had some really exciting things come out of that. We just had our first one in San Francisco. We had 3 in New York, and we've had 1 in San Francisco, and we're in the works planning 1 in Sao Paulo for the fall. And then the final thing I want to tell you about is this other project, this CartoDB that we released. So CartoDB came from our own frustration at the problems of making maps online. So we built a tool that puts together all the different sorts of open source packages that are available online, open source packages that can make maps that are really hard to put together sometimes. And we built software around it so that you can make maps really quickly and easily. And this is related to citizen science in that it lets you actually analyze your own data and do things like GIS and data sharing. So here's an interesting map that I made just the other day. My boss, Javier, he uses OpenPaths. If you're not familiar with OpenPaths, it's a tool that was put out by the New York Times. It's really cool. It tracks your movement all the time, and it makes it only available to you, but he made his available to me. Really surprisingly, he did a couple other things. He made his Twitter history available to me, and he also wrote a little Python script. These are available that you can actually extract all your emails from Gmail. And so he actually gave me all his history of emails, and so I had all his subjects and everything. So I started playing with that. And so this is Javier moving around Spain, and I started looking at doing different clusterings to show where he's sending the most emails and where he's sending the most Twitter and all those sorts of things. And so you can see that you can start using mapping to start trying to get some insights into your own life. Maybe you're using one of the Nike, what do you call those? Fuel band, yeah, or the Jawbone, or you want to start actually being your own big data collector, and you want to start doing some analysis. And these are the sorts of tools that you're going to want to do it. Actually, this is a really cool one. If you are have something to write down, you should check out this URL. This is a visualization we did with this tool of the data from old weather, showing once we had all the records digitized, we wanted to see if we could see where these ships were moving over time. And so this is a map that replays the movement of the ships. It's really exciting. This is a map that hopefully we're going to put out tomorrow. This is a map that has every location that the ISS has ever taken an image. And actually, if you click on any of those locations, you can see the actual image that was taken. So it's pretty cool. So you can explore what the ISS has done. So that's what I want to talk to you about what I'm up to, and I guess we'll answer some questions in a bit. Thanks.
So next up is Liz, talking about her work with Public Lab. And Liz.
Thanks, Sarah. Hello. Okay. So I work with Public Laboratory. The full name is Public Laboratory for Open Technology and Science. And so I'm speaking on behalf of a large, over 1,000 person open source research community. We're active here in New York City and also in many chapters around the country. So what you're going to see comes from the whole community, not, it's not me. And I wanted to start off with a slide that would give us some perspective on citizen science overall. It's a huge field, really exciting. And one way to kind of maybe understand the diversity of projects happening in citizen science is to imagine them on a scale of participation. And we get to use some late 60s diagrams to talk about this because really distributed participation was first becoming possible at that time. And here we can look at it again now. Maybe let's overlook some of the any negative connotations, but let's look at where the agency lies in participation. So who's asking the questions? Who gets the value out of the work that is done? And with that, we can talk about that more in the discussion. I'd like to introduce you to how Public Lab got started, which is improvising a satellite with a children's kite and a point-and-shoot camera. Also some garbage bags full of helium. And we called it grassroots mapping, and this is one of the many research methods that's been developed. Our MO is to appropriate or reappropriate technology for bottom-up activism and smaller communities. We aim for something called a full data lifecycle, where local communities ask questions that are aimed at local outcomes, customize the tools to capture the data that they need to answer the questions on their own terms. The ultimate goal of this kind of civic science is increasing individual and community agency, hence our name, Public Lab. So our technology stack of kite plus camera pointing down and a soda bottle is giving local communities the power of self-definition on par and exceeding equipment like this provided by government, military, industry. And in a context when mapping has traditionally been a technology of control that amplifies some views of landscape and overlooks others, we see this as shifting the balance of power. Along with our hardware, we built some simple browser-based software, so any picture that your camera takes of the ground can be stretched and positioned on top of existing satellite imagery. This is called MapNetter. When you click Export, we'll crunch your pixels into industry and web standard geodata. This has become kind of a model for all of our tools. We don't just do aerial mapping. We do infrared photography. We do spectroscopy, which is something that's part of the NASA Space Apps Challenge. And the hallmark of our tools is that we accompany simple hardware with simple browser-based software, and we take advantage of the high-quality, low-cost sensors in cameras and in thermometers. That's really the areas that we focus on versus, say, a lot of sensors that go with Arduino, such as cheap gas sensors for air quality, much less reliable and require calibration. Unlike, to much less of a degree, as cameras and thermometers. And so we do all this around questions of environmental justice, around communities that are adversely affected by government or industry decisions. Without being able to speak the language of data, communities are in the realm of anecdote. They can complain, they can tell a personal story, which has power, but frequently can't enter the public debate at the same level as a crispy data set can. So, for example, here we're seeing part of the shoreline during the BP oil spill oiled with pristine white boom, completely ineffectual, floating in the water. And this was the only way that people could prove that the industry solution to containing the disaster was in fact not working, because it's incredibly hard to get that message out over the PR blitz of a large corporation. So in this example from the BP oil spill in 2010, disgruntled boat captains and pissed off fishermen decided they'd work together with urban-based activists to go out and bring equipment into the water during a no-fly zone. And there's currently an Exxon oil spill that also has the same no-fly zone imposed, literally today. So there's no journalistic information getting out. The only word is the corporation's word. And by going out and flying a kite with a camera, we can capture imagery at 2 to 10 centimeter resolution, enough to see the birds on the sandbar, enough to see the oil sheen approaching the outer islands, and create an 8,000 by 8,000 pixel image, the whole of which you're seeing there fits within 1 pixel of the daily MODIS satellite imagery, which is the other publicly available imagery. And accountability is built into the image. That's the boat they were sitting on when they captured that imagery. We have an archive that is modeled after data.gov. There's about 250 maps. It's 1.4 terabytes. You can get out multiple formats to make your own base maps, or just download a GeoTIFF or JPEG for putting in your PowerPoint. Our archive additionally preserves chain of custody. We know everyone who touched every pixel in these maps, so that, for court admissibility. We also distribute to Google, so if you go out and capture imagery in this way, you could find yourself overwriting satellite imagery for your areas of interest. And the credit at the bottom to Public Laboratory on Google Maps allows you to click through and find the original map makers, so that they get credit and there's full data transparency. So in this way, we see these community-generated maps as kind of a Trojan horse to put out. We also distribute offline. That's super important for our community. That mostly does our information sharing online, but printing our maps out and printing them in single color so that people can annotate them and contribute back their observations is critical for our vigorous online community to also assist offline environmental justice communities. So let's move to New York. Here's an example of people getting out in their environment, putting in water sensors, paddling through ice, hacking cameras. There's so much initiative here in New York City, and there's a lot to find. Block-long basins filled in along the Gowanus Canal, chock full of circuit boards from the 1950s, floating rafts of polyaromatic hydrocarbons, and many, many pipes. All those blue dots are pipes that dump into the canal. You see the red one? That's the pipe they know where it comes from. And this is the official EPA survey conducted by a contractor. That didn't stop local Gowanus residents, though. They got out on an Arctic expedition of their own, and they made some observations. I don't know if you can see it far right. There's a very thin melt stream coming in. They found that melt pattern and have gone and since then identified yet another unidentified pipe. Some infrared imagery spotted a plume, which ended up being the remnants of a freshwater stream. And there are other outflows that, although I don't have the picture here, they had discharges from old septic tanks that the local mappers spotted and reported to the Department of Environmental Conservation. A simple example, at test site 1, there were, over 24,000 Enterococcus bacteria in an ounce of water. And on test site 2, there were none. The community used some advanced PowerPoint technology and, okay, now, and overlaid and found out that test site 2 is actually at the outfall of a forgotten stream. So the question here is, in the realm of government issuing big data, what happens when citizens issue small data? And it is possible to achieve victories. The circuit boards identified a new payer who will pay into the super fund to restore the Gowanus Canal. And that whole basin is now, was not supposed to be restored as part of Superfund, and now it will be. Here's another example about small data in the Gowanus watershed. So high-resolution data is turning the non-point source pollution issues back into point source. That was only an issue of resolution. And this is small data collected along the way by citizens who are educating themselves. So the data is effective, but it's the people who learn how to collect it themselves and become advocates with it that actually are getting real-world results. And so I just wrap with our community being a very expansive online community, and many people actually run their projects using our open research infrastructure for tracking contributions, but maintaining their own identities in it. So we welcome you to check out publiclaboratory.org.
Thank you, Liz. And last but not least, David is going to take a minute to set up.
All right, sweet. All right, so hi guys. My name is David. I'm the developer advocate from Foursquare, and then essentially what that means is I help people build location-powered apps on top of our platform. And then so today I'm going to give a little talk about like what Foursquare is, who we are, our data, what you can do with it, and what kind of like insights you can gain from the data that we have. And so who here has not heard of Foursquare? You can raise your hand. Good, awesome. So what Foursquare is very briefly then for this room. Like essentially, we help you make the most out of where you are. It's kind of our overarching vision statement. A lot of people think of us as this kind of thing that you can like see where your friends are. It's your social network. You earn points. It's like badges and cutesy kind of stuff. But it's a little bit more than that. We help you explore your city and connect with your friends. You can like find new places, find things about these places, share where you are, and then. This mic is messing up. But yeah, and then so that's kind of who we are, but more than just an app, we also have a large amount of data at our disposal. We have over 30 million users on Foursquare who have created over 3 billion check-ins. And then so that's a lot of data points. We have over 50 million places in our point of interest database. And then this number at the bottom is the one that gets me the most excited. We have over 40,000 developers who have built apps on top of our API using our data and just like creating cool things out there. We'll come back and talk about the developers in a bit, but for now, let's take a little deeper dive into this data and kind of see what insights we can gain from it, and essentially what insights can Foursquare provide about human behavior. Those are humans in the background; they're behaving. So we'll start off with something simple and fun, and everyone loves ice cream. So this is, not sure how I can see it, but this is essentially a map of check-ins to ice cream places overlaid on top of temperature at that time. So you can kind of see this general trend of, as the months get warmer, that's starting in January, ending in the next January, during the summer months, like people like going to ice cream places, and they like checking in there. So that's kind of cool to see. But what's more interesting to see is these kind of like more nuanced insights. So if you can tell here, there's a little blip here. So I guess the temperature rose that week slightly, but so did the check-ins associated with ice cream shops. And so it's these more like small kind of like nuanced insights that are more meaningful and interesting to discover. Same with here, like this one time in November, there was a deep drop in temperature and also a deep drop in the number of people that went to ice cream shops. This is a video of check-ins across the world, and then so this is a week-long series of check-ins that we animated. And then so what's cool to note here is that I guess just kind of watch North America, and then so that first kind of column there is what's happening in North America, and green is food. So if you watch the food kind of rise in the morning, lunch, and evening times, I guess, you can really tell where people are going during these times. In Asia, you can see the last bar kind of go up a lot, and that's the travel site. So there are some very interesting insights that you can gain based on how we categorize our places, and just based on our very large amount of data we have at our disposal. And then so these are kind of common trends that you would sort of expect. People checking into breakfast places in the morning, things like that. What's more interesting perhaps is the kind of anomaly. So these are check-ins we mapped in Manhattan before and after Hurricane Sandy. And so you can really tell when, at what point power kind of shut down in lower Manhattan, and then when it kind of came back on again. I think it's going to loop, and then I'll try to point out some interesting things. If you notice the green bar to the top left, that says food. So you can kind of see people checking into food places. There's this ebb and flow, and then right now it's kind of when power is shut down to lower Manhattan, and then we'll see once it comes back up again. But this next time that it plays, I want you to pay attention to what happens to the number of people checking into food places and restaurants. So at the beginning, you'll kind of notice that there's this, like a constant. There's a constant amount of people checking into food places, and then the interesting thing to note here is how the number of people checking into food places does not shrink once power shuts down to lower Manhattan. So even though we lost half our check-ins in Manhattan, the same number of people are still checking into food places. And so there are various inferences and insights you can possibly gain from this, whether or not they're running out of food under their place or they're just going to eat more. I think that's a very powerful insight that we gain based on the data that we have there. And then here it is coming back online. And then so these are all things that we at Foursquare have created. We have one more team of data scientists that have created these visualizations for us. But what gets me excited is what you guys can create with this data that we exposed. This is a project that the Tampa government undertook using check-in data from Foursquare. Let's pull up this video. So using data that they found that they got from us. That's unfortunate. They essentially did something similar where they mapped where people were checking into throughout an entire day in the city of Tampa. And then so you kind of notice in the morning people are getting to work, probably going to get some coffee, then they're going out for lunch and stuff. What I want you to pay attention to is this region right here as the day wears on and it goes more into the nighttime. So notice that it's going to get more and more crowded there at 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 o'clock, it's really kind of bumping there. And so you're wondering, where do people go a lot at night? Well, they go to bars and nightclubs and stuff like that. And so I just want to briefly pull up Google Maps. See if we can't find Tampa on here. So there's Tampa. Let's sort of zoom in on the region that we were taking a look at. You can kind of tell this was it. There's a kind of grid thing right there, and then there's a grid thing right there, and then there's a river kind of thing. And then so if you just search for bars here, you can definitely see all the bars right there in that corner where all the data points, where that heat map showed where people were checking into a lot at night. And so that's a very cool insight that the government of Tampa created based on our data. Let's see what's next. This was something that was created a few years ago, actually. Basically, someone kept track of when people were visiting museums and could give a recommendation on what days was it the best to go and see some particular place. This was created using Foursquare data. It basically, I guess, maps all your trips and where you've been. This is kind of me, my trips. And so what's also cool is that it lets you know basically like your carbon footprint. You know, so based off my travels, I've emitted 5,955 kgs of CO2, I guess. And then so that's like a nice insight that you can gain based off like data that we expose. And then so like in addition to these visualizations, I just want to kind of go over a few things that other people have made that are essentially using our platform for good. Snowball is something other that lets you essentially donate money each time that you check into a place. So say you go to like a coffee shop a lot, and then now like if you set it up through Snowball, every single time that you go and check into this coffee shop, you can donate like $5 or $10 to a cause of your choice. A few years ago, there was an Earth Justice campaign in San Francisco where they had an ad in the San Francisco bar where if you check into this ad, on each check-in, Earth Justice would have donated, I think it was like, yeah, it was $10 to their cause essentially. Sara-Jayne made an app called Don't Eat app, which is whenever you check into a restaurant that has health code violations, it like sends a text to your phone and say like, hey, don't eat here, go somewhere else. This last one, Gym Shamer, was actually created at Foursquare's last global hackathon, which essentially shames you into going to the gym. You hook up all your social media accounts, so like your Facebook and Twitter and stuff, and then if you don't go to the gym for like a week in a row, it like tweets and like posts out and says, hey, I haven't been to the gym, shame on me, I'm a horrible person. So that's a few things people have built on our platform for good. And now while I'm up here, I just want to give a brief overview of our platform and maybe how you can get started, since we're a pretty smart crowd. So we have an API that we expose. It's really simple to use. It's RESTful, so all the things that come with REST you can just do with it. And then so basically the API allows you to do anything that the app can do and a little bit more. So step one, create an app. There's a big green button. You click it. Step two, kind of learn how you can make calls to us. There are basically two big patterns of calls. One is when you want user data. So we take privacy very seriously. And so people have to authenticate your app. They have to give your app permission for you to see their data. And so that's one way that you can get that from us. The second way is a more anonymous, user-less way to get data, which essentially you can do like city searches and get recommendations and things like that, but these won't be like tailored towards any user's interest or personalized in any way. Thirdly, you can learn our endpoints. Again, we're RESTful, and then so basically like each URL endpoint that we expose is tied to an action. So we want to do a search, you just call venue search. If you want to figure out how many people are at a place now, you call our venues here now an endpoint. And just a few endpoints that I want to talk about now that could be interesting given the context of this talk. Venues here now lets you see who is at a particular, how many people are at a particular venue at a certain point. This is the result you get from JFK. So there are currently 115 people at JFK right now. Let's see what else we have. So venues, next venues allows you to create cool videos like this one. Which basically is a visualization of people transitioning in and out of New York City and Tokyo. So it's a similar kind of thing that we saw before, but this is how people are flowing into and out of these cities on a given day. And then so we exposed this, and we actually just exposed this endpoint earlier this week. And then what it does is it lets you know places that people check into often after a particular place. So I pulled it up for the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. And so after you check into the Barclays Center, people often check into the 4040 Club. And then what's interesting is that people check into the Atlantic Terminal after the Barclays Center. So that means probably after a game, they want to go home. And so they'll first go to the Barclays Center, and then they'll check into Atlantic Terminal after that. And then thirdly, finally, it's useful to see like where people have been, and so our user checking endpoint exposes that. And so we're on step 3. I'm not sure what step 4 is. Pretty sure step 5 is profit. So just follow these steps, you'll do great. And so just to recap, Foursquare is something that helps you explore and connect with people around you. On top of that, though, we have a ton of data that you can access through our API that's extremely easy to use. And then you can gain a lot of interesting insights based on our data. You know, things like how people are shifting around the city, what trends you can find based on these movements, and like someone's like personal history of where they've been and maybe where they're going. And so that's it. I'm David again from Foursquare. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, David. Of course, step 5 can sometimes make a difference in the world. And I can vouch for the API being easy because I had a bunch of crisis mappers using it last week. They're not technical, really. Okay, so question time. And I guess since I've mentioned crises, I'll start with a crisis question. So for each of you, I'm wondering if we look at an event like Hurricane Sandy, what you do applies to and how you've seen ordinary people collecting data, using the data from those events. So I'll start with Liz.
With me?
Yes, you.
David was just talking about.
I mean, I can talk about that. Yeah. So, right. So that was a visualization that we produced based on like anonymized information from our users. But one of the ways that you can use Foursquare itself to kind of in these sort of crisis situations is like if you have your friends or family as friends on Foursquare, you can just make sure that they're still like going home and stuff. You can make sure that they're still going to work. You can keep tabs on where they are during these kind of situations, and it's just a good way to keep track of where people are. And so that's one of the ways that you can use us to in these crisis situations.
Is this on? Yeah, during Hurricane Sandy, actually one of the browser-based softwares that Public Lab had written to help lots of people sort the aerial images that any one mission collected. This software called MapMill was adapted to allow people to sort through every picture that NOAA flyovers were generating of the damaged areas, and people were selecting whether there was damage visible in that picture or not, and creating a hotspot map for first responders and general crisis responders to use. It was also being used by the Civil Air Patrol. So I mean that's one great thing about developing in an open source ecosystem is that when you meet one particular community need, it often translates to another. So we were really happy that MapMill was useful during Hurricane Sandy.
Well, I think all my examples were far less in the moment, but during Sandy, at least, the mapping tool that I brought up, CartoDB, was used in a couple cases of people wanting to quickly visualize and share data with other people around them without having the technical skills to normally have built any sort of map like that. Somebody that does have the technical skills, though, John Keefe from the WNYC, for example, put up one of the most popular maps prior to the storm, talking about evacuation areas in New York City and making that data accessible. So for us, it was really about making the data available. That's what we worked on.
And John Keefe is doing some pretty cool citizen science projects at the moment, and I think Cicada track is going on at the moment. Okay, sorry. Next question. I'll stop answering mine. So how do people get involved in your projects? How do they find you and how do they get started? So, you want to take it?
Okay, I can take this one. Speaking for Public Laboratory, people usually either meet us in person because there's so many people out doing weird things outside, like with 6-foot diameter bright red weather balloons or with those shiny things. We have cats. Also, people find our website, which is publiclaboratory.org, and also our listservs are very active. They're sort of like a fire hose, so I'm sorry about that, but listservs is actually how we collaborate online. Get started. People normally start by saying, hey, I was trying to figure out how to find this out about my neighborhood. And then everyone will pitch in with ideas, tech support, people will get networked to other local people in the area, and they'll create their first field expedition.
Andrew?
Yeah, so speaking of Firehose, I always find trying to get involved in things, Twitter to be my first stop. But for this also, I'd say things like the events like the space apps and EcoHack has been amazing for getting people involved in these things. We also, actually Liz and I again, also help organize the GIS meetup. So if you're interested in things like mapping data and seeing what sort of projects are going on in the city that you can contribute to, those sorts of meetups are fantastic. So the GIS meetup is all about people making maps that either need help or just want to show what they're up to. And so that brings people together every month. And it's open to everybody. So those sorts of things are really great. And then for particular projects, go to zooniverse.org for us to see some of the things that we've been up to.
David, have you seen anybody hacking the data in Foursquare yet or using in their own projects?
Yeah, I mean, so a few of the things I showed off, so like those last three things I showed off actually were not produced by us. So the Tampa thing were like, developers in the Tampa government creating that. When should I go to someplace? Like all these things were created by people that weren't us and people that were leveraging our platform to create these core apps.
Okay, and the other side of that question is, how does somebody start a project? So,
well, for sort of the bigger rolling thing like Zooniverse, the Citizen Science Alliance that I mentioned is the organization that backs a lot of those projects, and there's actually a rolling call. I don't know what the status is right now for scientists that are interested in creating citizen science applications that they think they have a problem of scalability or some other issue that they think people doing citizen science can solve for them. And like I said, Zooniverse is all the browser-based citizen science, so it's looking for people that have projects like that. And so any scientist can get involved that way. Coming from the other side of it, if you're a citizen scientist that wants to get involved in these things, it's really about I always think it's about just jumping in. I mean, Zooniverse has the bar is very low for entry. And in fact, most of the apps actually allow anonymous entry, so you don't even need to sign up all the time. So jump in.
Liz?
I would say it depends on if any one of you has a strong idea for a project that for which there is no data currently available or for which the data doesn't reflect the current state of things. If you have an idea like that, you can pitch a project to the local community and find people to support your work. Otherwise, if you're just looking to get involved and you'd like to actually help another project, you would probably find an event in your local area and show up there for a half day and meet some folks and see like, oh, maybe there's some modification they want to do to the thermal flashlight that you know how to do, or maybe if they want the software to visualize it better and you can work on that. People end up pitching in all sorts of ways. There's many niches for people to find.
And David, what support do you give at Foursquare to people starting citizen science type projects?
So if you come to us with like a question about how to use us or what's the best way to use us, we have a community of people on Stack Overflow that can help you answer your question. And then if you write into us at api@foursquare.com, you have basically me to help you answer your question. And then so if you want support with creating an app with us, there are definitely resources that can help you with that.
Thank you. Yes, I asked for support earlier. So you've been talking about your own projects. Now, can you tell me about some of your favorite projects out there? What else has caught your eye and looks really cool? Anybody?
So one of the things I didn't show off this time actually was something that was created at our last hackathon. It correlated the stock market closing price to check-ins at bars to see if there was a kind of correlation there. And the answer is sometimes, but it's not scientific. And then so, I mean, there are a lot of just like great apps out there that have no platform, as I keep saying. And so you can definitely gain a lot of insights through these kind of mashups of data.
I can share some projects going around in the public lab world, at least. In Boston, they are creating a thermal fishing bob. What this does is it's a little buoy you can drag behind your canoe through the water to track if an industrial facility is releasing wastewater that's too hot. This is on a high EPA watch list. So expect in the future to hear about a new genre we're going to call environmental bounty hunting, because there are cash rewards for when there's a watch issued by the government for a known type of pollution. There are cash rewards pre-attached to that. Let's see, what else is fun? The ongoing mapping in the Gulf Coast, where over 100 miles of coast have been imaged, that's exciting to us because those images are entering the court. So that's sort of a new legal frontier. So very excited about that. Coming up, in the summer, you'll see an infrared camera being available on Kickstarter. So this is good for backyard gardeners or small-scale farmers to track like how their crops being fertilized, is water being distributed equally. And then in the fall, look for not a thermal fishing bob, but just a thermal flashlight that you'll be able to wave at the facade of your building. And if you're taking a time-lapse photo, you'll literally paint in color where the leaks are in your house. And this is, if you made this thing yourself, it'd be about $9. Both of these projects we're going to be offering on Kickstarter.
Cool. So for me, I think, I'm always a huge fan of the things I see going on at Plots. That's awesome. The Cicada project looks really amazing. OpenStreetMap is something that I heard come up once tonight, but we haven't given it enough love. It's a really great project to basically make a publicly available data set of all the world's roads and lines and features and buildings. And that's really exciting to think of something like that not being owned by a corporation or something like that, so that it's sort of owned by us. I love that. There's another one I was thinking of that I'm really excited about, but yeah, you're all great.
I love OpenStreetMap.
Oh, actually, the one I'm really excited about is one I don't know who's working on it, but the thing that I mentioned before, being a citizen science of one, being your own citizen science. I'd love to see some more applications coming up that let you collect your own data and put it back together from all these different places so that you can look at what you're up to.
Kind of like a quantified self thing, or more of a spying on yourself?
Spying on yourself, definitely. That way you don't have to admit it's you.
Just say it's your boss, yes?
Yeah.
And last question from me, before we throw it open out to the audience. So if I was just starting out in this, if I was just starting out in citizen science and visualizations, what sort of resources would you point me at? So if I just came and asked you, which websites, which books, which groups, where would you say to start?
Anyone?
Personally, for us, it's just developer.foursquare.com to get started with us and try to learn our endpoints. To produce the things I showed off tonight, like those maps and visualizations, internally we use a tool called processing, and there is a nice set of guides online on how to use that, and it's a really great way to generate really good looking things if you just know like a bit of Java, essentially.
I'm going to go before her. She's got definitely the most experience with that. For us, I guess if you want to jump into mapping, CartoDB.com will get your data mapped really quickly. If you want to become involved in a mapping community, the GIS meetup meets every second Tuesday of the month. So just look for new NYC mapping on meetup.com if you want to get involved that way. I don't know. Talk to us.
Account on CartoDB.
Talk to us. Yeah.
To put this in context, I would say, when science itself was first invented, we're really talking about people screwing around. People had no clue. Like the highest personality trait they valued was being so open-minded you'd even risk your own health and safety to try to test some fundamental laws of nature. Yes, I will stick my arm into a vacuum. Whatever. And over the centuries, science has become professionalized. It's become its own standalone thing with entire industries that serve its needs. And I would say that science is just one of many fields that's going through, radical deprofessionalization. So when we think about getting started, I would think of yourselves not playing, not using science toys. I mean, yes, to the extent that it's fun, but do think of yourselves as doing actual science. Because there's no, just not having letters after your name doesn't mean you can't ask rigorous questions. So in that way, for getting started, I would say you could peruse some of I would agree with Andrew and say you could peruse some of those really big, like Citizen Science Alliance and like SciStarter, really like the big hub type websites that aggregate a lot of different projects, or if you're interested in a particular topic area and you actually really do want to understand, like, wow, how can I test my water to know what's in it? I suggest that you do try Public Laboratory, because we make an effort to kind of decode like journal articles for each other, and we function as sort of actual science, but an informal science network.
Thank you. And now it's time for your questions. Question just there? Yeah. There's a microphone heading towards you.
For each speaker, what's your favorite social network visualization package?
Social network visualization package. Can you give like an example of like what you mean by that? Or just like tools you can use? I mean. Yeah, so as I said, processing is great. I personally don't have any experience with it, but I love JavaScript, so I use D3, and it's a really cool tool. It's interesting to kind of wrap your head around, but once you wrap your head around it, it's like very simple from that point forward, yeah. So I guess D3 might be my personal kind of favorite visualization tool.
Anything else? Well, I have to say CartoDB, right? No, I mean, I make a lot of visualizations on there. So JavaScript is by far the tool that I use, but then I use CartoDB for all the geospatial, being able to query it and make it come at time and all that. I was going to actually tell you some of the things that we've done there, but opted for just slides. But grab me afterwards and I can share some URLs with you if you want.
And I can't think of a public lab example of that, but in my own life, I have also used CartoDB.
I guess I count for this one. I tend to use whatever's around, so I'm just looking at what I was using last, and it was GraphViz, and processing, of course. So, next question.
I was wondering the extent to which, if at all, you guys, especially Andrew and Liz, have collaborated. It seems for the kind of citizen science piece of it, that people come to you. But do you guys do much outreach in particular to like urban policy graduate programs at universities, much less like high school kids in their level science classes or whatever? Because especially, well, for both your projects, I could see it at the levels of early learning as well as more advanced kind of planning, and seeing it as a fun, hands-on tool that reinforces important lessons that are happening in the classroom.
Totally. So that was a big part of the Notes from Nature project that we're launching. That's something we've been thinking about for a while, how we're going to do those things. So I can't say we've done it yet, but it's definitely something we're thinking about. For the mapping, I would love to do some younger students to do mapping. We have like this hosted account and everything. We give those away to students all the time, but I've also taught a lot of workshops to college students how to do mapping, and it actually ends up not being people that are interested in citizen science necessarily, but I end up working a lot with journalists, or people that want to be journalists and want to do data visualization for telling a story. And then in those cases, then I help them out learning how to do the mapping components of it. So.
I'm actually teaching a middle school class, actually 2 bilingual sections every Friday morning this semester. This is just getting started on formal education. I would say these these tool packs that we make, where you can get some equipment that you can kind of assemble yourself, and it picks up some data that is easy to upload and use our software to process. Teachers are absolutely free to use this themselves, and we are doing our best, and with partners from the community, maybe you, actually working up curriculums that go with that. But yeah, kids love just getting a hold of tools and going out and looking at stuff. Especially like now that we had LeVar Burton of Reading Rainbow and Star Trek actually use our spectrometer at South by Southwest. We're hoping we really open up to the Reading Rainbow audience.
And next question? Sorry, the next question? Okay.
I find it fascinating that you're embracing all of this new form of science. How do you make money, since from what I understand, you're not doing this as corporate entities, you're doing all this through collaboration as individuals. So there has to be some business model, because you do have to eat at the end of the day. So how does that part of the equation work?
Who wants to take it first?
Do you make money with it? No, well, so Vizzuality, we actually, so the citizen science stuff, a lot of it has actually been pro bono to start, and then we try to write it into grants for sustainability later. For the mapping, we try the best that we can to give that away for science and for students, and then we have paid hosted accounts for businesses if they want to do mapping for whatever projects they're doing. And so that's how we make the mapping software sustainable. And then we also just, when we have projects that we want to be involved in, we have a fairly good track record in the science community for data visualization and for WebGIS. And so we write scientific grants, scientific research grants with people and get funded on grant work. And so those are kind of the 3 ways, I guess.
Public Lab got started as an internet community. So before we had money, we were 7 people that only knew each other through the internet, through hobbyist communities. But we came together in person around the Gulf Coast in 2010 and worked with a whole bunch of local people. At that time, we applied for funding. We became 2011 Night News Challenge winners. We incorporated as a nonprofit to support the broader open source community and do kind of like the janitorial functions of an open source community, if you guys understand, like keep the servers running and keep communication channels open and things like that. Like some kind of, basically I stopped doing my own research and I help run the community. What's been very strong for us, I think we should talk about open hardware business models. Right now, we're talking about inventing stuff and not filing patents. We're talking about making, using licenses such that any modifications to equipment get reported back and build the original project more and more strongly. And our nonprofit offers those kits for sale, and those sales support our mission-based work. And then it also meets our goal of distributing more of this equipment out there so that either for a slow onset environmental crisis or a rapid onset environmental crisis like Hurricane Sandy, the equipment and the local researchers are already there embedded. So that's our mission, and our retail arm actually does serve that through distribution channels.
Okay, I'm going to take a couple more questions. So I just saw one in the middle there. Guys at the back, yeah? No questions.
This is for Liz. Can you hear a little bit about the Talk to Me project that we heard about earlier? A little bit unrelated.
Can we take, I would love to, but can we take this after we break, maybe? So
yeah,
we don't,
it's not,
I would love to.
Any more questions? We'll need it for the recording. Thank you.
So can you tell us what's the biggest challenge doing all this project that you have done? Is it collecting the data, or processing the data, or analyzing the data? Because from my personal experiences, when I was volunteering doing Cindy, to mention 2 data sets. One is from the donor, and the other one is the damaged school, which is in need. So I'm just matching what's in need and what's donated. So the problem of that data set is it's unorganized. All those products or services or money that was donating associated with one, there's no user ID, it's only a name. So I have to put a user ID, key ID to mention it. With the other data set, which is the school, what they need, is not necessarily the same category as what donating. So the problem is, it's a messy data. So I think that the process to clean and scrub the data is more difficult, it's taking more time than analyzing it and put it in use. So that's why I want to ask you, what's your biggest challenge when you do all these projects?
Yeah, actually, for the citizen science applications that I showed that we've developed, they have really systematic data collection mechanisms, and actually, so things like old weather, for example, where people were going through the ship logs and transcribing every bit of it. The way that we ensured that data was of high quality was every single one of those was actually transcribed 3 times, and then any time that that the different fields weren't the same, we could throw that record out and say that record just was too hard for the citizen scientists to do at this time. We'd actually started out asking for 5 replications, but we found out the citizen scientists were that good that we could nail it with 3 times, and if one of them didn't get it, we knew it was too hard. But we're dealing with a lot of different data sets than you are. The ones that we end up dealing with, the really heterogeneous data sets, is the mapping platform. And for that, the biggest challenge is time. It's just engineering time. We know the things that we'd like to do to make it better all the time, but we just don't have enough time to always make it as good as we want it to. It actually sounds like that's going to be everybody's problem, you know.
That sounds like a very interesting problem. And what I would say is how we get around like unstructured issues like that. It's actually part of the reason why we don't do a lot of big data mining, why we actually choose to make our own like very focused data sets, just so that we get exactly what we want. So I haven't had to participate in them, but it is so awesome that you got in there and tried to make those matches, and it just sounds like really great work.
That's an interesting project because pretty much like my job, I work for Yahoo, so we do data every single day, but mostly I don't feel like contribute anything to society whatsoever because this is profit center. So I'm glad that they actually, I think it's one of the meetup, I forget which one, I think it's business intelligence, something like that. They just like they literally sent out the data set to anyone on the mailing list. And that was 9 p.m. at night. So they said they need this tomorrow 8 a.m. I said, oh my god. So it's just my daily experiences, and also for that part, it's like I think that restructuring the data, organizing it, is actually one of the most important part that when you're starting before you can actually analyzing the data, because otherwise that is just a random numbers.
Okay, and very, very last question, just one. So I'm just seeing a hand going up at the back there.
Hi, this question I guess is more for David and Andrew, since you spoke a little bit about the source of the data, Andrew in particular, when you were talking about biodiversity data collection that tended to be where people happen to reside. How do you go about normalizing that? And for to be more representative of the true, diversity of the world. And David, I guess the same question applies to Foursquare, since not everyone in the world uses Foursquare. Not everybody in this room, I presume, uses Foursquare either. In fact, I can say for sure, since I'm not one who doesn't use it. How do you normalize for people who are not Foursquare users?
Okay, so who wants to take it? David?
First of all, I should start using Foursquare. Secondly, so we realize that our data does represent a subset of the world population, but based on what we show, we believe that it is a representative subset of the world population. And so we do know that we are very heavily based in westernized countries, but we are expanding internationally very rapidly. And so we're getting more and more data points from a lot of other countries that basically aren't the U.S. or Canada. I know for me personally, I communicate and I interface with a lot of developers, that are basically not from the U.S. That probably most of the people that I work with are developers not from the U.S. And so it's not just people here that are using our data; it's people all over the world who want to glean things from the data we have. And so as far as normalization goes, it really depends on what you're pulling from, right? So if you're a developer in say from Brazil or something, and you want to get data about Brazil, you'll be able to get pretty representative data from Brazil in that case.
Yeah, that's a really challenging question for biodiversity, and it's something that since I was just starting graduate school through a couple weeks ago, it's always the point of conversation when you get a lot of these people in the same room. And it just comes down to, so we have a tool that actually we built to do species risk assessments, and the way that we rely on them creating the correct species risk assessment is by only asking experts to do it in that case. Somebody who's an expert on where that species exists, so they can remove points that are not where they exist or overabundant in places where they aren't that abundant, so that they can normalize it through expertise. As far as the automated methods, like taking a bunch of point data about a bunch of different species and trying to automate modeling, that is really hard. It's just really hard to do that normalization, especially at things like a global level. If you're talking about taking data from a similar sampling regime in simple areas, that's fine. But this is actually stuff that I've looked at, and it's really hard the second that you move out of one area to try to compare it to species diversity in another area. But it's always a point of conversation, and other scientists that aren't me are better at it than that. But actually, I had a question for you about the Foursquare data. No, that's related to this. Is I was curious when you were putting it up there, the one that I saw was 120 people are checked into JFK, but we know that JFK has a capacity and likely whatever more people are there. I was wondering, given Foursquare data, there must be people that are trying to say, can we predict what the capacity of a place is, or what the total number of people that are there that aren't Foursquare people are there at any given time? And I was wondering, how well can you tell me what the fire marshal number is on a place? What's the capacity of a place? Are people doing that?
Not that I've heard of right now, but what we can tell you, I guess, is relative populations and relative visits throughout the day. So we know that maybe at noon there's always 200 people or so check into Foursquare at JFK, and then 3 a.m. there's only 1 or 2 there, right? And then so we can kind of give you the overall outline of the trend during the day, but without a really concrete point of reference. It's hard to get any of the static numbers, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think that's the end of our questions. So thank you for being very great. And thank our speakers again, Andrew, Liz, and David, for being very patient and very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks again to our sponsor, Twilio, and also to Sarah for doing such a great job on moderation. Thank you, AlleyNYC and New York Tech Council, and Startup NYC. If you'd like to get some more information about New York Tech events, you can just leave a business card up here on the front table. And if you're interested in the Space Apps Challenge, take a look at spaceappschallenge.org and register for the site, for our New York site. You can also see we've got a lot of challenges listed. And we still do have a little bit more time in the space if you guys want to gather in the front and network a little bit more. We can take a look at or talk about some of the challenges we have available. In 4 categories of software, hardware, citizen science, and data visualization. Don't be afraid if you're not a techie. We have lots and lots of stuff like creating a game for building a lunar colony, or just talking about narratives for space exploration, and other stuff that's completely non-technical in terms of challenges that we can work on. So I'd love to see everybody at Space Apps Challenge on the 19th, the weekend of the 19th, back here at AlleyNYC.